Shout, a Buffalo football podcast, hosted by Matt Parrino and Ryan Talbot.
No place else you'd rather be than right here, right now. When it's too tough for them, it's just right. The Bills make me wanna.
It is Wednesday night, and you know what that means, Bills Mafia. It is another episode of Shout, your Buffalo Bills football podcast. I am your host, Matt Parrino, and I'm joined, as always, by my faithful sidekick, my tag team partner, the bald menace himself, Ryan Talbot. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like when's the last time you shaved your head? I don't feel like we have the usual shine.
It's been a few days. I think Saturday or Sunday. So yeah, I'm getting a little behind here.
I like it. So you put out a couple. Well, before we get to that, let's make sure that we let you know that this episode of Shout and all the episodes of Shout are brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. And actually, I got a little story. So I went into Tops the other night. It was maybe around 5:30, 6 o'clock, just past that dinner rush. I was out of K-Cups. So I needed my Tops is usually the only one that has it all the time. Like I always can count on them to have my brand. It's I forget what it's called, but it's supposed to be the strongest cup of coffee that you can have. Anyway, went in there, grabbed it. Dude, they got the Halloween candy all over the place. Looking at me dead in the eyes and just basically whispering in my ear, 5 to 10 pounds is coming in the next month because I'm going to eat all this Halloween candy, and I'm really nervous about it.
I know this is the worst time of year because you get the little mini Kit Kat sitting around. That's my go-to when the kids have their Halloween candy, the Snickers, everything else. So it's a worrisome time. I was at Tops recently too. Best breakfast pizza around. That is my go-to spot for breakfast pizza. So little shout out there for Tops for that.
I grew up here, and I didn't know breakfast pizza was a thing until I came back.
I
don't know. Yeah, I feel like it's taken off in the last couple of years. Am I right, or has this always been a thing?
I've always loved it. I mean, growing up, there was 7-Eleven near where I lived, and not 7-Eleven, Unimart. Unimart had a decent breakfast pizza too when I was growing up, but there are different places. But now Tops is my go-to. It's one of the only places I can actually find around here, though. In general, that makes that breakfast pizza good stuff.
I like it. Well, I do like breakfast pizza. I like all pizza, but definitely check that out at Tops because you are right. It is delicious. I've had it a few times. All right, before we get into a little Wednesday update here, I was out at One Bills Drive today. We'll bring you some of that. You had a fun post this week. It was the Josh Allen apology form. Why don't you let everybody know what your options were?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I saw those floating around. I tried to track down who started it. There was a few different forms going around, but essentially anyone that bashed Josh Allen and the Bills for when they made that selection can now kind of there's a way for them to come out and say, hey, we were wrong. So, I only watched ESPN. I didn't watch any of the games. I only listened to these people. So there's little check boxes for people to actually fill out and then sign it, and then you can send it back. So funny little forms, print some off, give them to some people that that either bash the pick or bash the prospect, because through 3 games, the Buffalo Bills have a legitimate MVP candidate at quarterback.
And I like it. The last little box is, I will hereby respect Josh Allen, and I will not talk down on the future All-Pro and Super Bowl champion.
That's right.
This is a really fun post. Shout out to, I'll give him some love, Twitter handle BI11S Mafia, Bills Mafia on Twitter. Go give him a follow. That was a fun post. All right, let's get into Wednesday here, and we are going to welcome in our first guest of the evening in a minute here. Probably get him in early, but Micah Hyde, John Brown did not practice today. That's the bad news. The good news is some real good news, actually. Dawson Knox is back in the mix, And Josh Norman, who we've been talking about for weeks here, is Levi Wallace at times has looked like, some of the struggling form that he's had over the course of in little stretches here over the last 2 years. Getting Josh Norman back in the mix would be a big deal. Now, it comes with a caveat. The Bills can welcome him back to practice. He can have his uniform on, his pads on. He could be there all week, and they still could choose not to activate him, which would then put him on IR for another 3 weeks at least. So Sean McDermott didn't want to give away any designations today. He didn't appear on the injury report. So we're kind of flying blind here a little bit. But seeing him out there today, watching him run around a little bit, do some football activities, that was a good sign.
Yeah, and Levi Wallace actually had a pretty decent game last week against the Rams, had that huge interception considering the Rams didn't punt at all that game. That was a much-needed turnover for the Bills. But having that other option across from Trey White where if Levi's having a down game or if an injury pops up here or there, because I feel like this season we've seen more injuries than we have in any years, in recent memory, at least over the first 3 seasons, not just the Bills, the NFL in general. And obviously I think some of it was to be expected without having a traditional offseason, but big name players going down, and I mean like all season. So you want as much depth as possible. Having Norman possibly being able to come back as soon as this weekend would be a huge boost for that secondary from a leadership perspective, but also from an experience perspective as he knows Sean McDermott's defense like the back of his hand.
Mm-hmm. Zach Moss was back at practice. He was limited today. That's a good sign. You'd like to see him practice a couple times. And again, this is Wednesday. As we get to Friday, we'll have a better picture of what this is going to look like on Sunday. But some positive developments. All right, let's not wait any longer. When we got somebody in the green room, I like to get him in here as soon as possible. Bring him in because we got our thing here. Let's add him to the stream. Jeremy White, my friend, how are you?
Good, guys. How are you?
We are great. You should all know who Jeremy White is. He is the co-host of Howard and Jeremy every morning, 6 to 10 on WGR 550 Sports Radio in Buffalo. And first of all, you got to give us a little glimpse of tomorrow because you tweeted at Howard tonight, I saw, and you said we got a lot to talk about tomorrow.
I did. I've got a ton of Raiders trivia that is kind of fun. But the coolest thing, I'll give it away because Howard, whatever. I'll spring it on him. What I looked and found was 3 years ago today, the Bills played a game, and I'm pretty sure I can identify it as the game that I thought maybe Sean McDermott is the right hire. Maybe this guy is legit. And I wonder if you guys can remember what game it was. 3 years ago today was the first, maybe they've got something with this guy.
I'm going to let Ryan go.
Thanks.
He's usually good at this stuff.
Gosh,
well,
no,
do you want a hint?
Yeah, I'd like a hint.
Once I tell you what game it was, it's early-ish in the season. It's week 4. I think it's week 4, and the Bills go to 3-1, and they win the kind of game that the Bills never win.
I'm drawing a blank here.
And I got to say, I struggle to remember.
I think I saw it in the feed here. I was looking over and someone wrote something.
Oh, give
Falcons.
it.
What's that?
Falcons game.
Atlanta. Yeah.
They were
an underdog, right? They're an underdog. They go to Atlanta. We're all thinking, okay, this is what the Bills do. They go to Atlanta. They lose. But they didn't. And I actually went back and I found my tweet from that day, which just said, guys, I think the Bills are good. It wasn't supposed to be a drought-ending year. They had beaten the Jets. They'd beaten the Trevor Siemian Broncos. And then here it is, week 4. They go and they beat Atlanta. And we're all kind of looking at each other like, what's going on here, right? Like, do they have something? And they go on and they break the drought and they make the playoffs. And I really think it was that game, the first time that I thought this team is well coached. Their offense still wasn't great, but you just kind of got that feeling that they might be onto something here. And that was 3 years ago tomorrow. So that's the tease, is that tomorrow it's the anniversary of that game.
That's so cool. Well, we will look forward to listening to that as always. And, I wanted to have you in tonight because I was listening to your show a couple days ago, and I think that you guys just got off on a little tangent about just how fun this is all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like the Bills for so many years. I remember growing up, I date myself a little bit here. I listened religiously to you and Brad Ryder back in the day. And I'd always long for the moments that you would talk about NBA because there wasn't really a lot to talk about for the Bills late in the season. So, I mean, you've covered this team for how long exactly now?
I mean, it might as well be 20 years, I think, right? Like I moved to Buffalo full-time in 2001. I was here for a summer before, so 19 years. The first game I remember was Bills Saints. I was working on post-game Bills Saints in a season opener. They played, and like Sam Cowart was on the team. So I think that's 19 years.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right at the tail end of them being good.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yep.
Okay. So you talk about this team on the radio every day. Was there ever a point in this, 2-decade run where you're like, you may be talking to your, a family member, a friend, a buddy, a college classmate? I can't do this anymore, guys. Like, I can't bring myself to do this anymore. Was there ever that point?
No. I can tell you it never got as bad as it is for the Sabres right now. Like that, in all seriousness, it never got that bad because, for the Bills, for the longest time, they took their cracks at the quarterbacks. Every time, whether it was JP or it was EJ, a quarterback kind of resets you. And no matter how bad things are, it kind of becomes that moment of okay, year one, like we're going to see how this goes. Year two, it's time to step forward. Will there be a year three? And granted, it hasn't worked out for the Bills as they've done that until now. So, even when they had Ryan Fitzpatrick, there was a time where Fitz was fun. Fitz beat the Patriots, people will say like hope springs eternal for the Buffalo Bills all the time, and fans always buy hope. And I get that. But every couple of years they had an idea, they had a thing. They were never really bad. They were always just kind of right in the middle, right? Like 8-8. How many times did they pick between 8 and 13 in the draft? It was every year. So it always felt like they were not that far away from being good. And every couple of years they got a quarterback. And finally, it seems like that carousel is, we're off the carousel. And this is different. This is a lot of fun.
Has there ever been a year on the other side, the flip side of that, where maybe entering the season you thought this team could be legitimate? Kind of like now after 3 games, you're thinking, okay, they could actually make a run here in the AFC. In your time covering the team, has that ever happened for you?
I can tell you, I was texting a friend of mine about this today. My friend Paul sent me a message because like the last time they were 3-0, they're 3-0 last year. But if you go back a couple of years, I was at the game in Arizona when Trent Edwards got knocked out. So that one was tough. They're 4-0. They were off to a start. That was, he wasn't a first-round pick. He's a third-round pick that kind of comes in and immediately really impressed. So it was kind of one of these adventures in finding a guy that, oh, wait a minute, maybe this guy is a quarterback of the future. Maybe we found something here. And he got knocked out on the 4th play. So that was a long way to go to see the Bills lose a game and see them not even be competitive because they lost Edwards to that injury. But, it is there have been times of belief. I can remember Lossman's game in Houston. He followed that up with a late win against Jacksonville. There's back-to-back wins where it was a little bit of a maybe this is the moment where JP figures it out. But there really hasn't been along the way anything like this. And I guess, you kind of have to acknowledge that this could fall apart, but it's never been this good. It's never been this high where the offense is this good and everything's firing and they're getting points. It was always they beat, a couple teams here and there. They might have gotten a bounce, and maybe they got a bounce against the Rams. But I will say that I do think it does feel like it's higher than it's ever been at this point.
So we're at this high point right now. 3 weeks ago, entering week 1, what was your biggest skepticism ahead of the opener?
I guess it was probably whether or not Josh Allen and the offense, would their A game, and this is still my skepticism, I suppose, is their A game on the level with the A game team's A game, and that's the question I think we all kind of have. Like, are they up there with the Chiefs? Can they play with Baltimore? And one of those teams is the Rams. And the answer to that test was yes. I watched opening night Rams-Cowboys, and that wasn't the prettiest game, but the Rams early on looked sharp. And I tend to think the Rams are kind of back this year for a little bit of a bounce back. So to do it with the Rams was to answer yes. Their A game was with the A offensive team's A game. And that still is the question. So, one test passed so far. There'll be a couple more. Kansas City, I actually think New England is a real test now more than they would be if they had Brady. And Pittsburgh's back with Roethlisberger. I love it because it feels like they're kind of in a heavyweight division now. You know, like they've got real opponents. You look at the schedule differently. It used to be you looked at the schedule and you saw the tough games and thought, okay, well, 4 losses there. So where are we going to find the 9 wins or the 10 wins? And now it's totally different. Now I want to see the heavyweight matchups. I want to see the Steelers and even the Titans. You know, I think that's a good team too. Offensively, they were very good last year once Tannehill went in. So, you know, it's about keeping up for me. Can they keep up with the real good teams offensively? And so far, the answer is yes.
I'm open to the idea of Tennessee ahead of Baltimore in 2020. And it's not just based on what we saw. I mean, I think it's easier to overreact in those moments, big games. You know, I've been kind of on the train, and everybody knows I'm very high on Josh Allen, but I've been a little concerned with playoff Lamar, which I don't think is getting enough attention or discussion. He's an extremely great player. He was great in the regular season last year. I thought that, you know, far and away the MVP. But I think it's a different game once you get to January. It's a different game. Like we've seen the struggles for quarterbacks that have had success in the regular season and struggle at the next level. Patrick Mahomes has done it from the beginning of his second season when he was handed the job. Other quarterbacks have been good from the beginning in the playoffs. It's not always like you're never going to be good, but I still think I'm kind of sitting back and waiting on Lamar a little bit. And Josh Allen is in the same boat. He hasn't done anything in the playoffs as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, like, you realize Josh is 1 first-round exit from that conversation. You know, Peyton Manning went through it. I wrote about this today at WGR550.com. Peyton Manning went through it. Lamar Jackson is in it. Andy Dalton never got out of it, right? Lost 5 playoff games in the first round. I'm sure Cincinnati was really excited when he showed up and made the playoffs in year 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Like, you're always at your next bar. And I do think that bar's coming for Allen. Like, that might be the number one reason their goal is to, you know, fans maybe should be to win a playoff game, is that he gets that because he was playing well enough to win that Houston game. And, you know, the number of things that went wrong for them, not just for him, but for them to lose it, you know, that just, it sticks with the quarterback. So I totally agree with you. And I think that Allen is real close to being in that conversation. And when they make the playoffs this year, which I think they will, that's storyline number 1 for me. Like, okay, here we go. Everything's ratcheted up, and are you ready?
And to your point, I think that if Josh doesn't clear that bar, it's going to be tougher on him because Lamar has that MVP to lean on. He could have the 2 playoff games with really bad completion percentage and, you know, 2 losses and all of that, but you still can go back to last season when he was the best player in the league for most of the weeks. You know, it's not like Russell Wilson, who, you know, has obviously had his struggles at times in the playoffs, but he's got a Super Bowl. I mean, this
right away. Yep.
Exactly. So, yeah, to your point, I think that's
Tony Romo. Think about Tony Romo, right? His career was defined by not doing enough in the playoffs, even though he played well. And even though one of his losses was on that, the Des Bryant fumble that everyone, or incompletion that everyone thinks like that was a catch, like scoreboard, you know, at the end of the day, it's scoreboard and you got to get the wins.
Yeah, so the offense, though, has been lights out through 3 weeks. And I think entering the season, we thought, okay, offense is going to be a little bit better. Defense is going to be great. They've been great throughout this entire tenure. Defense has not been great. So, you know, through 3 games, how concerned are you with this Bills defense?
Well, one thing about it is I think the context of it, and that is that all offense around the league is up, and the Bills defense, last I saw, I think it's hovering around maybe average, like in the middle. And I think it will get better. McDermott, they've had some games where teams have gashed them on the ground. I'm thinking back to, you know, the Saints ran all over them back in that 2017 season. So there have been some games where things kind of get off track a bit. I'm not that concerned about it. And part of that comes down to the offense for me. You know, we talk about like 19 years talking about this team. They've had a good defense maybe 12 times. And I finally got to the point, it's like, I don't care about the defense. Just talk to me when you've got an offense. So I kind of want to be careful about not being a hypocrite. They finally got an offense, and I say, like, I'm worried about the defense. You know, like, now's not the time. I kind of have to say, I'm not worried about it because I got what I asked for all along. I do think McDermott will get things in order. I mean, this team, you guys know, this team's well coached. They have been well coached pretty much since he showed up. It goes back to that point I made about that Atlanta game. You just see that they're ready most nights or most days. And my level of concern is not that high right now. We'll see once they face some better teams. but I wouldn't say it's that high at all.
Mm-hmm. Offensively, and I want to talk about Stephon Diggs, but I think the idea of sustainability, and you mentioned you alluded to it a little bit earlier about, this Rams game was a real test. This was one that, Aaron Donald going against him in the middle, and every time that Josh Allen dropped back to pass, you're sitting there as a Bills fan worried about what that guy could do. And I think for the most part, other than a few plays, they did a good job against him. But is this kind of production sustainable? I mean, whether it be questions on the offensive line, the rotating positions on the interior with Cody Ford and John Feliciano maybe coming back. John Brown's hurt this week. That's been a nagging thing. He's been on the injury report 2 weeks in a row. Are they ever one guy away from this thing, maybe going bad? Besides Josh Allen, obviously.
Maybe. My number coming into the year for this offense and, for Stephon Diggs was he was only targeted 94 times last year. To me, it's just – it's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And from an efficiency standpoint, the number is he was the first ever receiver to get 1,000 yards on under 100 targets. Or I'm sorry, I don't remember it exactly. But the idea is you have this incredible weapon, and the Minnesota Vikings just decided we don't really want to use it that much. And the Bills, that was a big question, right, for them. Will they target Diggs enough? Will they have enough passes to go around? And so far, they're very pass heavy. The answer is yes. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's one of the reasons that they're doing so well offensively. Teams focus on Diggs. I've loved Diggs for years in Minnesota. He's the type of receiver that I just love to watch. I mean, he's like an upgraded Stevie Johnson, who's one of my favorite ever Bills, because if you're the guy that gets open no matter what and beats the best man cover corners, for some reason, that just works for me. So I've loved Diggs and the idea of the trade. And then it happened. I mean, I'm over the moon. I know one of the big questions was, will he be happy with Josh Allen? And so far, the answer is an overwhelming yes. So, I think sometimes success breeds success. And what they're doing, they've got it right now. Just keep doing it. And I think there'll be times where they struggle. And the answer will be feed Diggs. Find a way. Get him the ball. Throw him the ball. Contested catches. Whatever it is, just keep going to Diggs. I think that's the answer. When times get tough. Last year, the guy to go to was John Brown, who's very good. But on that 4th down against Cleveland, on that 4th down against Baltimore last year, they went to John Brown. This year, that's got to be Diggs.
And I think it was on your show, I remember, really, pounding the table for this trade. And it was immediately after. So, that I did pound the table for it. And then when the trade came through and what the Bills gave up for him, I was like, yeah, sure.
100%.
Maybe even throw in another pick, because what he's doing right now is exactly what was missing last year.
Yep. Well, think about it this way. You could have had Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson might turn out to be a really nice receiver. He had a great week last week for the Vikings. The 4th round pick is the price to fast forward time to that guy in his prime. You paid a 1st and a 4th, All right, here's a 4th round pick. And instead of Justin Jefferson, let's assume he's the same receiver as Diggs, which is a gamble to begin with. Okay, we'll just pay to fast forward and get a guy who's good right now. I never even blinked at the cost of the trade.
And oh, by the way, that 4th that you're talking about was one they got in a trade, and they still had their own 4th, which turned into Gabriel Davis. So really, if you take all of that now, months later, I mean, you just have to be absolutely over the moon about this deal, Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. So, you mentioned the Sabres earlier. We know how they've been the last few years. So comparing, the Sabres with where they are and the Bills with where they are now, how fun is this, covering this Bills team? And then how much right now do you miss being at the stadium where obviously right now no one can be?
I miss it a lot, and it's kind of changed for me over the years. I spent a couple years in the press box just doing stringer work for ESPN. I spent a couple years doing pregame and then going home. I'd have some friends that went to games, and then when I met my wife and my wife's family, it became that every Sunday is like Thanksgiving. Every Sunday at the stadium we're in the camper lot, and it's my brothers-in-law and her cousins, and we have 20 people, and we see the whole family. So the game experience changed for me a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, and I definitely miss it a lot. I'm not one person to sit here and say, why can't it happen, and complain too much. I'm one to totally understand public health. So, I'm just doing what we're doing, And if 7,000 people were able to go, which I think that's possible, and I don't think that's far away. Even though the Bills put out that statement, it was not definitive. They did not say no fans for the Chiefs game the way they did for the first two. No fans. They just said as of today. And anytime I see that in a statement, those statements, they pour over the words. They pour over what they're going to say. They said as of today, unless things change. And today, the story is that the governor's going to tour the facility. So I would hold out hope for the Chiefs game. I would hold out hope for the game after that, which I forget who that is.
Might be Patriots.
Seattle. We get
Seattle and Patriots.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think it's Seattle. By the time the Patriots game rolls around, I'm hopeful. I hope that 7,000, 10,000 can go. I don't know that I'll be one of them because I miss the big scene. I'm one that, I'm all about the scene, the whole thing. And I'm with everybody that I do miss it an awful lot.
Well, you can listen to him every weekday morning with Howard Simon, and if you will, and you can listen to it on demand. And most of the time, I got to say, as early as I am up, I usually listen to it on demand. I grab it on the Apple Rewind there. Howard picked the Bills this week.
Yes, he did.
How did it go?
12-4.
All right. Those are always must
4.
listens. I love listening to each week how that all plays out.
The game he keeps flip-flopping on a couple games. One is Tennessee, and the other is the 49ers. He keeps kind of pushing them back and forth. So we'll see.
I think it's tough to go in this league, to go on the road 2 times in a row like that. And especially with, all these looming things now. I mean, you got the Titans who we saw from Tre'Davious White today, the absolute chaotic thing that ended up being, because there was just some confusion on the way that he answered the question. I went back and listened to it 5 different ways, and I do believe that he was referring to that. We'll clarify that with him next time we talk to him. But, what's going on with the Tennessee Titans, what's going on with, the Vegas Raiders. And, I think we've all been out at this stage and seen people without masks on. And it's a little bit, it's worrisome. So I do understand his thoughts on it.
Sure. And Trey's a guy that gave a lot of thought to, opting out on the season. So as someone I think we would all respect as someone that takes it seriously, like when Trey speaks about it, if he's talking about the Titans, like I'm going to listen because I know he's a player that most definitely takes it seriously.
All right. Go check out his article up now at WGR550.com. You hear him tomorrow morning. We're very excited. Jeremy, thank you for taking a little time on this Wednesday night. We appreciate you, man.
Thanks, guys. Be well.
All right. Take care. All right. So let me get this background here going because we got to switch it in between each person. We're going right along here. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast. That is the first episode. And people, Ryan, everybody liked the format last week when we had the segments almost. We had Jordan Reed from the Draft Network, Greg Tomset from Cover One. Bang, bang, bang. We have a 3-person lineup tonight. I like it. It flows.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of keeps things moving, keeps things light. I like it as well. It is a really nice little format. So maybe something we can keep doing here on a week-by-week basis.
Yes. If you have any questions, if you want us to talk about anything Raiders game specific, remember, we will be live tomorrow night for our special Bills versus Raiders preview show. So if you drop them in here, I will check that out and we will take care of that tomorrow. But next up, we got to welcome in our next guest from Channel 4, Heather Prusak. How are you?
Hi, guys. What's going on?
Not much. Just hanging out on this Wednesday night. And you were so kind to offer us some of your time. You got shows to do tonight. You're going to be on the news.
Yeah. Doing that news thing, right?
Exactly.
I can't lie. I'm a little sleepy still. I took a power nap before I came into work, and I think that was probably a really bad idea.
Yeah, see, you're brave. I can't nap. Like if I nap, my whole day's off, my whole night's off. And my wife always makes fun of me. Like we get to like 9 o'clock now, and we have 2 kids, so Ryan knows. I'm out. I am out. And if I nap, it's over. My whole day is messed up.
But that's your excuse. You have 2 kids. I don't. I have a dog and a, fiance at home. So what's my excuse? I fell asleep during the 4th quarter of the Monday night game, and I was so mad at myself. I'm like,
he's one of my good friends. You do
what
have
has
2
happened
kids.
to me? What? Yeah, pretty
You
much,
do have
right?
2 kids. So I completely understand. No, happy belated birthday. Caitlin just pinched me off to the
Thank
side
you.
and reminded me to make sure to let you
Thanks,
know.
guys.
So that is very exciting. You guys went to Left Bank. How was it?
Oh, so good. I think I'm so full from that dinner. That ravioli piece, it's just monstrous. If you've never been, you should, because it's so good.
You had a fun kickoff to your birthday week. Big Kansas City Chiefs fan. You watched them win big on Monday Night Football.
Yep.
What are your impressions early on of this Kansas City Chiefs team?
I mean, they're a team that, after especially what we saw last year, they're never out of games. Like, no matter what the situation is. I mean, even against the Chargers last week, where it's coming down to the wire, and the defense looks terrible and all this stuff, and Mahomes and company can't get anything going. You sit there and you're just not worried about it. I mean, they're never out of a game, and whatever the situation is, they're gonna find a way to get it done. So Chiefs fans are in a great place right now, because while they might make you sweat it out a little bit, they're never. You just don't have to be worried about it.
Yeah, you said they make you sweat it out a little bit, but you probably don't sweat as much because of a Mr. Patrick Mahomes. Just how good is this quarterback?
I mean, how much time do we have? Like, I mean, the kind of throws that this guy can make are just absolutely insane. I mean, that underhand shovel pass on Monday Night Football the other night, and just the way that when he's out of the pocket, and just the calmness that he has when he's making these throws, and when he's looking downfield, and there's no sense of panic in him, and it's just the things that he can do. It's just incredible. It's just like I just can't say he never ceases to amaze me. Like, he's so exciting to watch, and I am so excited for when they play the Bills, because that's going to be a hell of a game.
That's where we're going here, because I watched that game on Monday night, and I started thinking about how far away are the Bills from, not being what Kansas City is, because they're a defending Super Bowl champion. Ever since Patrick Mahomes stepped on the field, they've been one of the best teams in the NFL. But how far away are they from competing with them? Because I think that one of the cool things, if you're a Bills fan, about how this team is constructed with Leslie Frazier, with Sean McDermott, despite the slow start on defense, they kind of are built the best to be maybe a foil for the Chiefs if Josh Allen could keep this going.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see, because going into kind of backtracking a little bit, going into last week's game with the Rams, we were talking about how that's going to be kind of a measuring stick for them, because, beating the Jets and the Dolphins, okay, that's all well and good, but like, what did that really tell us? So, we said that game was going to be kind of a measuring stick, and they ended up winning, and it wasn't pretty at times, but they got it done. I mean, to me, I'm looking ahead to this Chiefs game. You talk about a measuring stick and a barometer for where they are. That's going to tell us, that's really going to tell us a lot about just what we're seeing with this Bills team here, going up against the best of the best, going up against, the best quarterback, I mean, in the league, and what they can do. And on defense, the Chiefs aren't always, firing on all cylinders there, but defensively, they have some big playmakers, and they can get to you. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up playing out. And as far as how far away they are, I don't know. I really don't know how far away the Bills are to being that kind of team. I think the word consistency is what I'll throw out. Like, I want to see more of Josh Allen playing the way that he has in these first 3 games. I want to see that consistency, because while the Chiefs might be able to have slumps in games where, especially again against the Chargers, or I mean, hell, even what they did in the playoffs last year, the Bills aren't a team where if they were down by that much right now, I don't have the confidence to sit there and say, oh, you're down by 20 points. Okay, you're going to come back and win the game. You know what I mean? So I think consistency and not having those lapses in games, that is what I want to see more of, to be able to say, okay, so they're this close away or whatever from being somewhat of what the Chiefs are.
Next up, I want to talk a little bit about what surprised you so far. But before we do, we got to pay the bills.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck, starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
So as Matt was saying there, expectations for the Bills, where are they compared to what you thought you were going to see out of this team 3 weeks ago? Where are your expectations so far?
As far offensively, they've actually exceeded my expectations, and not because I didn't think that they didn't have the talent to be doing what they are, but my concerns more so were over developing chemistry and having these shortened preseason and the virtual off season and dealing with the pandemic and the restrictions and things like that. That's more of where my concerns were, is just getting some of these guys on the same page and coming together so much more quickly than what they normally would have to. So I'd have to say, that they've exceeded my expectations. The fact of how they've been able to come together, to gel, to get that chemistry, the timing, even the rookies, what they've been able to do, and having the abnormal off season, the way that they've really gotten up to speed. That's why I'd say that they've exceeded my expectations.
We talked a little bit about this afternoon in the chaos of the Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer saga that I started. But no, that basically what happened was what's happening this year is that a lot of times we'll have two players in one Zoom call. And so they'll get a lot of questions, like, sometimes after games like this last week, we had Micah and Jordan, the same one. They kind of take their turns. This one was just Tre'Davious White coming in to sit down, waiting for his turn. They were both on screen, and Jordan was asked about, the situation in Las Vegas with the Raiders, and, a few guys going to a charity event and didn't have masks on, kind of on top of what we just saw, what we're seeing in Tennessee with 4 positive tests, and now the possibility that their game might be postponed a few days while they try to figure all of that out. And these two guys were basically asked, what are your feelings on all this? And, Jordan obviously came out and said, this is not something that scares me or bothers me. I feel like the protocols are in place and they're doing a good job of it. Trey, on the other hand, and not surprisingly for a guy that was thinking up until the final hour about potentially, opting out, was like, yeah, man, some of our antennas are up in here. He said antennas, by the way, not antenna, which would be just, the plural form of the little things on the bugs.
We know what he was talking about.
Exactly. But no, so I understand kind of both sides of this thing, and more so Trey's, just because that would probably be how I would feel if, you're about to go on the road and go play in a stadium where people are out in a state that's on the ban list in this state, and they're out without masks on. It can be a little bit troubling.
I'm a little nervous for them personally. I mean, I actually just came into work and we were talking about, what if they come back and they have some positive tests on the Bills because of, going to Las Vegas or going to Tennessee the following week. I mean, the fact that you have these two teams at the center of these COVID-19 situations, and they just so happen to be the next two teams that the Bills are playing, that is, I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned, but there's a little part of me that is like, I really hope that there aren't any positive tests that come up for the Raiders and then therefore pass it along to the Bills. So I'm going to be kind of, holding my breath a little bit come the beginning of next week and then the beginning of the following week, depending on what does happen in Tennessee, because up until this point, the NFL has done, or in the league, teams have done a really good job of limiting the spread. You've seen, I think going into week 2, there were 0 positive tests among players. And that was a really encouraging sign, because not being in a bubble, especially, that's huge that teams have been able to limit that. And so that was a really encouraging sign to start the season. And now, we're 3 games in and now this stuff is happening. It's just got to be, the responsibility falls on the individuals. And, you got to follow the protocols. It's on everybody. So I hope that nothing comes of it. I hope that, they return safe and, but yeah, we'll have to see. Definitely raises some concerns though, when those are their next two opponents.
Yeah, so the Bills are heading to Vegas. Getting a little bit of an echo there. Bills are heading to Vegas this weekend. They're going to see some familiar names, Zay Jones and Nathan Peterman. Describe their tenures, I guess, maybe in one or two words.
Rough. I mean, at least specifically for Nathan Peterman, I would say rough. I mean, he had a rough go in Buffalo, and he was put in some really unfavorable situations. I mean, the fact that his rookie year they're in the middle of trying to make the playoffs, and then McDermott flips the switch and starts him against the Chargers, and they throws 3 interceptions, and it's funny. We were actually, John and I were actually talking about this earlier, how we were saying that if the Bills stay on this path that they're on right now, and they continue their success and consistency, and Josh Allen becomes this, great franchise quarterback that, he's shaping up to be, and they make the playoffs consistently and things like that, and they become contenders, how are people going to look back on that whole Nathan Peterman, the kind of beginning of this whole experience? Because he was like at the very start of Josh Allen's, taking over. He was, one of the last quarterbacks to play other than Josh Allen for the Bills. So it's interesting to see how years from now, depending on what happens, I guess if the Bills end up doing well in the way that they are now, I feel like people are probably going to look back and almost just laugh about it because it'll be one of those things. But it's just really interesting that it was really rough for a while at the beginning of Josh Allen's time here, just from a team perspective. So yeah, rough. And, and Zay as well. So it's, but also too, both on a personal level, they were really great guys to talk to, especially during all the ups and downs. I will say that as people, they were always very, respectful, even when things were going just absolutely terrible. I mean, Zay had his, off the field issues, and then, Peterman with his on the field issues, but they were always very great to talk to. So, as people, I do, I wish them the best, because yeah, they were in some really bad situations, and they were still very, very respectful to us in the media.
You mentioned they were great to talk to in the room. And I always like talking about this because, partly now reminiscing about it because we don't get to do it anymore, but who over the course of your time, A, how long have you been covering the Bills? And B, who's your favorite interview, in that time?
So I'd say, I didn't cover the Bills my first year. I was part-time. So, probably like the last 5 years, 5-6 years. I mean, this is going to be a cliche answer, but I love talking to Lorenzo. I love talking to Lorenzo. Kind of an under the radar guy. Eddie Yarborough was always so funny to talk to. He isn't a guy that, you talk about a lot, but he was awesome. I love talking to Eddie. Micah's great, but Lorenzo, I think, was my favorite. I know that's probably a very cliche answer because he is who he is, but I mean, just always just so thoughtful in his answers. And, he was, the thing that I appreciated about him was he said things without being cliche and without giving things away, but he still gave you something. We hear so many times McDermott's so close to the vest with everything, and he doesn't want to reveal too much. And I'm like, look, for some questions, there's a way to answer it without revealing too much. You can say something. But Lorenzo was always, that guy that he always took the time. And I mean, he would hold court in the locker room. I mean, you guys would see it for, basically until they shut down the media portion in there, which is a good, 40-45 minutes. I mean, he was always talking to people. So I just always really appreciated him. And yeah.
I would love to come up with another answer. This is my third year, and it's going to be tough to top him because, because it's so hard. I'm able to kind of put myself in their shoes, just, maybe more so because I was behind the scenes in the UFC and I saw, what the kind of gauntlet of media could be for some of the top guys. And so I kind of get it when guys are like, man, I just don't want to talk today. Like whether it be you had a tough day of practice or you're just not feeling up to it and you don't want to do it. Lorenzo, no matter what, rain or shine, every single time, he showed up and he always gave you the best stuff because, he was real with you. And, I'm excited to call him a friend, on the other side of things. And also shout out to Jeremiah Searles, who I'm going to have to get on maybe next week. He was awesome. Absolutely awesome. We had him on a month ago and he blew everybody away. So we'll get his thoughts in the first month next week. Before I let you get out of here, I want to talk about something that I've seen pop up in the last couple of days that have just, and maybe the one day it really irked me because I'm sitting there playing with my daughter. We're drinking we're having a little tea party, a little picnic. And, I'm just looking in her eyes and I see just a couple of whats with comments about women in sports or women covering sports. And I thought we covered this. I don't understand why this continues to be a thing. And I guess it's always going to be a thing. You talk about what's going on in this country in so many different areas and, the frustrations that we all have. But I wanted to bring you on to just, just to remind everybody, like, you're here, you're not going anywhere. And honestly, to be honest with you guys, I told Heather this afternoon. She's killing it. She's one of the best people on this beat. So if you're not following her, if you have a problem with women covering sports, it's time to graduate kindergarten.
Get over it.
And I know it's a tough time about this kind of take because we just watched what we watched on TV last night, but that's a whole nother topic. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I would just love to have a real conversation with some of these people, which I know is not probably in their brain cells to have real conversations. But I just want to be like, be real with me. What is your problem? And I feel like a lot of it probably boils down to, jealousy, or, just being brought up on this old school way of thinking that, women aren't supposed to be doing this and women aren't supposed to be covering these things. And it also doesn't help when there are stereotypes out there and there are some women that don't do things the right way and don't go about it the way that it should. Whether there are questions about how they got there or what they do. And it's unfortunate because there are some like that, but majority of us do things the right way. And that's why I said this on a podcast last week. I feel a responsibility to go above and beyond because I feel like I personally I don't want to give not only myself, but the rest of women in sports who are doing things the right way. I don't want to give us a bad name. I don't want to fuel any kind of stereotypes or any kind of trolls. So, I just feel like I have a responsibility to the rest of us to make sure that I'm doing things the right way. And sometimes I feel like that means overcompensating too. There are some times where I will write a script, even just something as simple as a script, and I find myself almost over explaining myself, something that might be simple that I'm like, why am I adding all these extra things? It's because I feel like I have to work 10 times harder than other men, because it's like I have to almost just every day, and with every little thing I'm doing, I feel like I have to prove myself with every little thing I do. And that's unfortunate because not that you shouldn't work hard, but hard work and feeling like you have to prove yourself when you've been doing this for a number of years, and your work should speak for itself. But unfortunately, with every little thing I do, I constantly feel like I have to overcompensate and again, just prove myself. So I'm hoping that maybe as some of these people, I like to say it's like a generational thing, but it's not, because people in our generation, my generation, whoever, there are these guys out there like that. So I can only hope that it gets better and just get over it. Like it's not changing. I mean, it's just not. So you can either be bitter about it and sit there like a keyboard warrior, and that's how you're gonna spend your time, or you can just accept it, and maybe by accepting it, you're A, gonna learn something from us, and B, going to enjoy some of the content that we're putting out there about your favorite teams and your favorite sports.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that there is a level of jealousy. And, I think a lot of times when you see a lot of the vitriol that's thrown at, media members, whether it be in sports or anything else, I think because a lot of people would love to be doing what we're doing. I don't take my job for granted. Like my wife tells me this all the time. Like she's great about this. Like when I come home from work one day and I'm like, whether I had a bad day, I didn't write a great story, or I had a bad podcast, or whatever the case may be, she'll always remind me, like, do you know how many people would just kill to just have your bad day? And so we got to remind ourselves of that. But at the same time, I want everybody to realize that, just using Buffalo as an example, I'm amazed at the level of professionalism and the level of work ethic in this market by everybody, from the women to the men to the younger people to some of the elder statesmen that have done this thing for a very long time, that continue to carry the torch and carry the mantle. So I just think everybody needs to take a step back and just realize, like, if you want to do this, come do it. It's available to you.
Well, and here's my thing too, is that it's like, I don't care if I have an opinion that you don't agree with, that's fine. But why can't we have a discussion about it? Like, I am open. Like, I want to hear people's opinions, whether I agree with it or not. Like, that's why I do this. I love to interact with people. I love to hear what you have to say or whatever. But why is it, if you disagree with me, it's, oh, you're a woman, you don't know anything and all this stuff. It's like, no, we have a difference of opinion. So let's talk about it, instead of throwing like things out there that literally have nothing to do with that opinion.
Exactly.
So
well, I can't keep you too much longer, because you got to get ready for big shows tonight. Channel 4 WIVB. Make sure you get to your TV set. Check out the news. There was a lot of stuff going on today down at the stadium, and I'm sure you'll have a lot on it tonight. Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. All right. So we are moving right along. We're going to bring in our next guest in a few moments. He's in the green room, but I did want to get to something real quick before we do, because we had some questions on it earlier, and I wanted to kind of go through the whole injury list a little bit, because an update from down there. We talked a little bit about the 4 guys at the top, but one really interesting one that I thought was Dion Dawkins is in a red non-contact jersey, and we saw Ty Inseki finish the game for him on Sunday. If he is somebody that, this shoulder injury is something that could potentially keep him out, that could be a big deal on Sunday.
Oh, a huge deal. As good as Inseki has been when his number's been called and he's played for this team last year, this year, Dion Dawkins is probably, in my opinion at least, the best offensive lineman on this team. So you would be losing a lot from a playing standpoint, obviously a leadership standpoint. We've talked a lot about that edge that John Feliciano brings. I think that Dion Dawkins kind of brings a relaxing presence to that team, where they're not going to be maybe on edge or too nervous or anything like that, because he's always so laid back. He's always seeming to entertain the guys. So it would hurt on and off the field for a variety of reasons if he were out on Sunday. So definitely something to watch as this week progresses. It just seems like a lot of teams are banged up. I saw some comments in here too about the Raiders. They're likely to be without their top 2 wide receivers, their top 2 young wide receivers in Ruggs and Brian Edwards. So you're talking maybe Zay Jones' revenge game. I wouldn't count too much on that, but
hey,
maybe,
he had a touchdown on Monday Night Football.
That's
right?
true. That's true. So maybe he can prove me wrong there. And then Hunter Renfrow. But obviously their biggest target would be Darren Waller in that passing game, with or without those guys.
I think the big thing too on this, and we're going to get to our next guest here, but the big thing to take away from today's injury report is hang tight. Let's see who practices tomorrow. If things change tomorrow, last week, John Brown was out on Wednesday. He returned on Thursday. No big deal. So I think we'll kind of take that day by day here. All right. Without any further ado, let's get to our final guest of the evening. And he is, he's a Bills fan. and I came across his feed. I want to say towards the end of last season, and I like to call him the Bills film Threadmaster because this guy just delivers so much content for Bills fans. His name is Stoppy Papadopoulos. Did I say it right?
Close. Stoppy Papadopoulos.
Stoppy. Okay.
I've had a lot worse.
All right. Well, he sent me a little video beforehand so I make sure I don't mess it up. And of course I mess it up. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. I think
awesome.
My cortisol levels are finally starting to recover from Sunday, so I'm good to go.
That's awesome. All right. So Wistful Papa Doc, very, very fun Twitter handle. Go follow him over on Twitter. And the cool thing, if you go back through his feed, you'll find a lot of Josh Allen's film from last year and a lot of the good stuff and bad stuff, that he'll also share from this year. And, when it comes to Josh, let's start before this season started. And, you had all this time to kind of dive into the tape from last year. You put up a couple off-season threads. What were the biggest questions that you had about Allen entering this year?
Yeah, I think, just starting with some of the strengths that we continue to see this year. I think the incredible escapability that we see week in and week out. Some of his intermediate passing game that, he excelled at last year with John Brown in the offense, that I really feel like he wasn't given much credit for, just given the accuracy narrative. Throwing on the run for him, 3rd and 10 back in his own end zone, Beasley, that's really where I think Allen excels. And you've continued to see it, early on in the season, hitting Brown in that Jets game, and a number of times in the Rams game as well. And then some of the tight window throws. So I think when you typically think about arm strength, a lot of people think about, getting vertical in the passing game. But with him, it's really about making some of those smaller zone windows bigger, which you saw a lot last year. But moving on to the weaknesses. So I'm sorry, you guys getting some feedback?
Yeah, a little bit. So I don't know if that's like the mic that's being used or just from the computer itself, but definitely some feedback there.
Yeah, if you could, Staffy, can you try to change your audio feed? I tried to change it for you, but it kicked me out instead. But yeah, why don't you react a little bit to that, Ryan? What he was talking about.
Yeah, no, I think you made some great points about what we've seen from Allen, what we've seen this year, what we've seen over the progression of his career in terms of the tight window throws, the trusting the wide receivers, having guys like Brown, Diggs, things like that. Year one, even, and obviously year two as well, Allen was a guy that trusted his arm. I shouldn't say too much, but he was a guy that tried to put a zip on every single pass that he made. And sometimes it was short throws that didn't need him, long throws, he overthrew the guys. You're seeing a lot more touch this year in year three, whether you're talking in that intermediate or long area. And I really think that that's something that I've come away really impressed with here early on this season.
One thing that I was really looking at for this year was how he was going to handle the stressful moments. You know what I mean? One of the things that I think the knocks from last year was in that Houston game when things kind of went off script and, Houston started to charge back and things, they weren't working as well. We saw him, have moments where, and I've said publicly that I thought he didn't play nearly as bad as everybody, really thought, I think. But there were moments where, he kind of just goes out of his own head and makes crazy plays, and that's part of who he is. But I think that what we saw on Sunday was a good sign in that, okay, I have so much talent around me, and I trust my arm so much for a lot of these different throws. I can go into that mode and reel myself back in. Ooh, now we're not hearing Now we're not hearing any audio. So you're gonna have to change your audio input at the bottom. This can get tricky when you start changing audio formats and everything like that. trust me, we've had plenty of technical difficulties over the years here. But I mean, did you see that, Ryan? Like, would you say that what we saw in that game on Sunday was okay? He went into hero or gunslinger hero mode, whatever you want to call it, and he reeled it back in.
Yeah, there were times where he was a little too frantic, where he took those sacks of 15 yards, or whatever the case may be, where you're sitting there and I can honestly say, because I watched it with my family, so there's some diehard Bills fans there, and they're yelling, "Throw it away, throw it away!" But Allen, he's this guy that believes that he has to make that throw at all times, or he has to make that play. But instead, it led to a sack, and sometimes this season it led to a sack by Aaron Donald earlier in the game that led to a fumble. Now, yes, the replay showed he had he was face masked on that play, but there are times where he still tries to do a little bit too much. The lateral to McKenzie, so on and so forth. But he's definitely reeled it back in, and there's been so much more good than bad this season through 3 games.
You got your back? Yeah, we can hear you, but it's still that static.
Sorry about that, man.
No, it's all good. Let's plan to do it next week. It's no big deal. Because I want to because I don't want to, one of the things now in this day and age, the audio, if it's so choppy like that, it's tough for fans to listen to, and I want them to hear what you have to say. So let's get together again next week.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right, dude. Bye.
Thanks.
All right. So any questions in the feed? We'll go here for a few more minutes. So sorry about the technical difficulties. Really good dude. I really like his energy that he brings on social media, and we'll get him back in here. If not next week, we'll get him back in here at some point, because definitely go give him a follow, because I think it's fun. Narrative wise, where are we at in the Josh Allen narrative? I mean, I think you were asking me before we started tonight, like, some of the people that have, flip-flopped a little bit, kind of on what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with the Josh Allen apology form. But one big apology was Manish Mehta out of New York. He actually wrote a full column about how wrong he was. And, some people they're kind of dragging their feet a little bit. They don't want to at least admit we're seeing a player that has grown exponentially from where he started, out of Wyoming, right at that draft point to where we are now.
Yeah. I don't think people forget, so I don't want to even say that, but he was a prospect. He was a true prospect compared to these other quarterbacks in that first round of that draft. Baker Mayfield, a lot more experience. Sam Darnold, a lot more experience. Rosen was supposedly the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft class. Allen was a guy that had all the intangibles, but he didn't have the same kind of experience. He didn't have the same kind of pedigree. You needed to truly bring this guy along and develop him. And you heard him thanking the Bills for the way that they've coached him up over these 3 seasons. And he's done his part too by every offseason really working on his flaws and seemingly getting better and better each year. Last year is that intermediate game. This year it's been that deep ball. He's made better decisions. He's been reading the defense, using his eyes. So it's been all about the development and the team's patience, the fan base's patience. It's all paying off now, because you don't usually see this anymore. You see how quickly quarterbacks can get pulled by coaches, by regimes now. You can see that sometimes quarterbacks maybe don't get a fair shake in this league. You can look at Josh Rosen and look at where he's been. Arizona, well, he had some moments in that first year, but then they bring in a coach that wants his own guy, and his own guy is Kyler Murray. So who can blame him? He goes to the Dolphins, not really a fair shake there. So now he's on a practice squad and he's with Tampa. So you just never know in this league. There were a lot of people that did not buy in. I mentioned in that form letter, there was at least one NFL expert, quote unquote, that called him a parody of an NFL quarterback. And I did see some pretty positive tweets from that gentleman recently about Mr. Allen. So, maybe he's coming around as well. It's just that everything has paid off so far for Allen. And you're right. There's some people that are dragging their feet. There are some people that will never admit to being wrong. They'll find some kind of flaws and say that it's Brian Daboll, it's the talent around him. But anyone that's watched him and watched every single game of his, as we have, as I'm guessing most, if not everyone in this group that's with us here tonight has, they have seen the progression of Josh Allen.
Let's do a couple questions here. Torres Tube on YouTube, he asks, I'm wondering if Croft plays or if Knox takes his place back. I think it would be a tough call from that Croft performance last week. And I think that that's an interesting discussion because even before Dawson Knox was injured, I feel like he's struggling to find his place, in this offense in terms of being there and being not only there to, as an option for Josh Allen, but when he gets the ball and gets a look to make a play with it, he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands because he's so physical. But when you have like a fumble or you have a drop, like he experienced so many drops last year, you start to lose that trust a little bit. And so I think to his point, to have a big moment from Tyler Croft last week and have the luxury of a guy that showed that he can do it in a big moment. Yeah, I think that, you do want to get Tyler or keep Tyler Croft involved. I still think Dawson Knox being available, he's a guy that they have big plans for. And not only does the organization have big plans for him, I think that Josh Allen has big plans for him. You hear Josh Allen talk about him this offseason. He's been very complimentary and very direct about what he thinks Dawson Knox can become in this league. So when you have that, you want to cultivate that. You want to build that. And the only way to build that is to have him on the field playing in this offense and trying to find his role. But to your point, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a closer to even split once Dawson Knox gets back.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Croft was great last week. He took advantage of every opportunity. 2 big touchdown passes, obviously the game winner being the big one there. But Knox brings something special to this offense, or he can bring something special. You heard Josh Allen on that Mark Sanchez podcast say that he thinks Knox could be a top 10 tight end in this league. We've seen flashes, whether it's the stiff arm, whether it's getting that separation last year in that New England game and almost scoring the touchdown before halftime. But then we still see the mistakes, the turning your head upfield before you have the ball, the fumble that happened early this season after he had a big game. Knox can create crazy amounts of separation. He can get open. He can be a weapon in this offense. It's just getting that consistency. And just like Josh Allen at quarterback, you probably need to work with Knox to get that out of him. He was not used much at Ole Miss in terms of receiving threat. They had some great receivers in that system. So it's going to be a patience type situation. And if he develops the way I think the Bills think he can, well, then the Bills are going to have a scary tight end for the first time in a long time. They've had some decent tight ends in their history, but they've never had a great tight end that pops out in my mind, at least from the 80s on. You had some reliable guys like Metzler's, Jay Reamersma, but this guy, if he can get everything put together, can be really special and can be a weapon. But for now, yeah, split it up. Let him get his confidence back a little bit. Let him learn from Croft. Let him get some pressure off of him, and then bring him along a little bit each week.
Justin Murray asks, what do you guys think about the Raiders situation? Do you think the players that weren't wearing masks are going to play? Yeah, I mean, unless there's like a COVID development that, everybody keeps their fingers crossed that's not the case. But yeah, I think that they play. And I just think that everybody's got to, without being preachy, just take it more seriously. And I understand everybody that sits there and says, well, look at the how many people get it and don't even get sick, or, if you really blow it out, like, even if you want to say that the death rate isn't something that you should really be concerned about, just coming at it from a football fan perspective. If somebody has COVID, they can't play football, which impacts this whole season. So you have to take it seriously. I mean, I go up to, the stadium every day. I take a test, as part of as a pool reporter. I have to make sure that if things ever go inside, I'm available and I'm up on my testing. And so you got to take a sacrifice, and you got to make sure that, I go down there on Saturday mornings. I make sure I'm careful about what I'm doing. Now, I'm doing that anyway in my life, but there's a lot of people in this league that are making sacrifices to get this season in during these hard times. So, when you see people maybe not taking it as seriously, even if it was a mistake, even if it was an oversight, you just kind of look at him. And to Tre'Davious White's point today, yeah, it's kind of like it raises your eyebrows a little bit. So yeah, I just think you got to be a little bit more responsible about it, no matter what your belief is. And I go back to, I can't remember who it was now, but somebody had a really interesting take on all of this. Oh, Kirk Cousins, anti-masker, like somebody that, for him, he is not worried about COVID. He is a professional athlete. If he gets it, he'll be fine. He's not worried about it, whatever. But he wears a mask and he goes about the protocols. And, at first I was ready to, get all up in arms about his comments, but then I realized that he's still going about the protocols and respecting other people. And I think that's what it's about. Respect everybody else involved trying to make this season a thing. And that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great take. But going to that question, I would be stunned if the NFL came down and said that, those guys cannot play on Sunday. They're going to be tested extensively, just like every player is. And so to Matt's point, unless there's some kind of positive test, I expect them out there on the field. Now, could there be a fine involved, just like the coaches were fined a few weeks ago? Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that's what we see happen here. But I think you'd have to almost be a repeat offender. You'd almost have to see one of those guys photographed or in a video again where they're not wearing a mask before anything like that would take place.
One more question here is about Josh Norman and his availability. And I know that there's some people that, are looking forward to just, I think that there's like just a curiosity of what this potentially can look like. Even for those people that think maybe Josh Norman's not going to be the guy that he was, just the chance to get a look at it and see if it could be any better than what the Bills currently have. And that's not even a slight at Levi Wallace. It's just, if you can upgrade on a player, you see it all the time. Even like, this last week with Quentin Spain getting moved out of the lineup because they, for whatever reason, thought Cody Ford at left guard and Brian Winters would work better, which, Brian Winters, I don't think had a great game. And I think that there would be an argument to be made that you want to get somebody in that role as soon as possible if John Feliciano could come back or whatever it ends up being. But I just think people want to see what that's going to look like. How is he trending? It's tough to say. He was out there in full pads, uniform today. Everything looked good, but we got to get to Thursday and Friday. And even then, the Bills don't have to activate him. They can keep him on the IR for 3 more weeks. Let that hamstring really get to 100% if it's not there already. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, Ryan.
I just don't think we'll know anything about Norman until Saturday. That's when they actually have to make that decision if they want to play him this week. I think they'll keep everything close to their vest. Closing thoughts, though, going to be an interesting game this week. Raiders give up a ton of points, a ton of yards, but they've had a pretty decent offense this year, so could be another high-scoring affair in Vegas. I think fans are going to have another fun game to watch this week.
For sure. All right, I get out of here. Game 1 tonight, NBA Finals. We'll be back tomorrow. Adam Hill from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Put away your swords, Bills Mafia. Don't go too hard on him. He's going to come in here and preview this game a little bit. We had him on in the summer or late spring to talk about his once exciting Bills love affair that has ended. And we'll go a little bit into that as well. But we'll mostly focus on the game, talk about Bills versus Raiders this Sunday. Will the Bills keep their undefeated record? We will find out. This has been the Shop Buffalo Bills Football Podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. Thank you so much for watching. And if you can, head over to the audio platforms. I know I always say it, but it really helps us out. Subscribe, rate, review, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back tomorrow. Keep it locked on to Syracuse.com in New York Upstate for all your Buffalo Bills content. Have a great night, everyone.